Greetings, duelists, and welcome to another video. So, I know a little bit behind in the news, but over the past weekend, we got revealed the first archetype out of the 3 archetype main side set Justice Hunters, and that one is called Dragon Tail. So, Dragon Tail is basically a fusion archetype that composes of one level 4, level 5, level 6, level 7 monster. The first 2 being spellcasters, the other 2 being dragons. And 2 fusion monsters, one also being a spellcaster and also being a dragon. Before we talk about the archetype in itself and the gimmick behind the archetype and what it's supposed to do, let's talk about fusion summoning like in the modern era. In order for fusion decks to keep up with the current metagame, you have to use either A, minimalistic resources for your fusion summon, or B, have your fusions be able to recur back or recoup from the card advantage or the card economy that you're using for them, or a little mix between both. We've already saw a couple of fusion archetypes being very good in the past. For example, Branded got adapted with the ability to just mass fusion summon with Branded Fusion. We saw Fymena being able to use even spell and traps for their fusion summons. We saw Tearlaments having the monsters themselves just shuffling back themselves as fusion materials. And then we also have Chimera, which is a really cool gimmick of just not only just recouping back card economy, but just having all the fusions and the materials themselves all like just a mass card advantage and like be able to keep up with what your opponents do and create layers of interruptions and even playing around layers of interruptions. So in order for Dragon Tail to be as good as those aforementioned decks, it has to have the ability to do any of the combination that we just mentioned beforehand. Now, without further ado, let's begin. So, if you're clicking on this video, you probably already know what the Dragon Tail monsters will do right now, but I am going to give a brief synopsis for others that are just like me and we're a little bit behind in just keeping up with the current archetypes. So, all the Dragon Tail monsters share one special effect. That effect is, when they're used as fusion material, you can set a spell and trap directly from your deck. That's really, very strong, because out of the spell and traps that we have, the traps are layered interruptions, and the spells are extra ways of fusion summoning. Before we get to activate these spell and traps, we'll read over all the monsters first. Lucius adds a Dragon Tail monster upon summon. Fymena allows you to fusion summon for a spellcaster and a dragon by discarding herself from the hand, and it's a quick effect. Urgula, while it's in the graveyard, you can target a spellcaster or Dragon Tail monster and just place it on the bottom of the deck. And if you do, well, place this monster back in the bottom of your deck and then recycle the spellcaster. So basically, Urgula can recover these 2. And Pan, whenever a fusion is destroyed, can special summon a non-fusion Dragon Tail by shuffling itself back, placing itself in the bottom. So, right off the bat, these cards all fit the criteria I was talking about. They all have a way to just recoup from themselves being used as material, but also have beneficial effects that just help you with recovery. Now let's read over the spell and traps. Let's read Ketu Dragon Tail. Ketu Dragon Tail is basically Rhoda. It just adds a Dragon Tail monster. However, if your opponent controls a monster, you can immediately fusion summon for a dragon or spellcaster monster from your extra deck, using cards in your hand or field as material. Really good card. Like the fact that it's just a consistency card is already good in itself. However, the fact that it also gives you a beneficial effect when you're going second, or if your opponent already like establishes a monster on the board, it's also really good. Like, I really like this dynamic. I think we need cards like this for more archetypes. Just give extra effects to cards. They just work well whenever you don't go first, without it being super overbearing. Before we go over the gimmick behind the deck and other things you can fuse with this, because take note, you can fuse for any dragon or spellcaster. It doesn't have to be a dragon tail. And we'll see later on how this is very like informative and very beneficial and very scary as well. Let's go over the other cards. We have Rahu Dragontail. Rahu Dragontail fusion summons a Dragontail monsters using a hand and field as well. But you can also use a material from your deck as long as you fuse specifically for a Dragontail monster. This isn't that scary. You're always going to send a Dragontail with this. And the reason for that is all the Dragontail monsters ask for a Dragontail monster as well as monsters in the hand. So you're always going to be sending a Dragontail monster from your deck if you're going to use this effect. But you already know that all the Dragontails get effects when they're used as fusion material. And Urgula specifically has an extra graveyard effect that you can use on the same turn, like right off the bat. So you're 90% of the time probably sending Urgula with the Rahu Dragontail. On other instances, you could send a Pan if you already have Urgula in rotation. But yeah, really good card. Also, it locks you into fusions for the rest of the turn after this card resolves. So it's not as lock intensive as something like Branded Fusion, but it is still a lock that you have to consider after you resolve this effect. Now we have Dragontail Horn. Dragontail Horn targets attack position monster and returns it to the hand or extra deck. Then you can place one Dragontail card from your graveyard or banishment to the bottom of your deck, except Dragontail Horn, and draw one card. So, really good card. It can recover your cards that are on the field. It can bounce opponents' cards. The fact that it has the extra effect of just returning and drawing is also fills the criteria that I was talking about when it comes to fusion archetypes. So really, really good card. Dragontail Flame. So you can target a face-up spell card on the field, negate its effect. Then the same thing as the Horn, you can just return to draw. I really like that this just negates a spell card. I know that a lot of people probably look at this as a downside, but I feel like spell cards are the things you are worried about negating the most as compared to monsters and trap cards. We don't need another Omni Negate. We just need a soft negate for a category of a card while also recouping advantage. The last thing we need is just another oppressive archetype that just is almost unbeatable going first if they resolve everything. So I really like that this just negates spells. It makes whatever opponent is facing you be more creative with their board breakers and not just rely on spell cards. Another fun fact about these cards, both Flame and Horn can be negated by something like Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. So keep that in mind when you're doing this. Also, Rahu Dragontail can be negated by Ash Blossom as well as Ketu Dragontail. So Ash Blossom pretty much negates all the spell and traps, which is very important. Now that we read every single card in the main deck, let's read the fusion monsters. The fusion monsters are going to gauge just how powerful this archetype is. We already know that the guard type has the gimmick of just setting all these spell and traps and just reusing them over and over. Let's start with Grammel. So Grammel, the materials are 1 Dragon Tail monster and one monster in the hand. We'll get to this part very soon. When you activate a Dragon Tail card or effect, you can target 1 card your opponent controls, destroy it. If 2 or more monsters are sent to the graveyard at the same time while this card's in your graveyard, you can special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. Incredible fusion monster. I have nothing bad to say about this card. It's very easy to make. Like, any monster from the hand is a very big deal. The activation condition of this card is not hard to do because, take note, all your Dragon Tails activate whenever they're used as fusion material. So if, for example, you're going second and your opponent has like 1 card on the board that you just want to destroy, you can just chain block this alongside your other Dragon Tail effects. Well, this has to directly respond to the Dragon Tail effect, but again, you can just use this alongside your Dragon Tails and just start picking apart your opponent's board while also recouping advantage. Also, the graveyard recursion effect is also great. It means that you can use, if this card is already in your graveyard in the mid to late game, you can just reborn this card if you just fuse for something else. And just use this card's effect if you use a Dragon Tail. Also, this card being banished does not matter because Horn and Flame can just return the banished Dragon Tail in order to draw a card. So you also have recursion from banishment as well. 10 out of 10. Dragon Tail Altharion. Again, you're going to use your effects once per turn. If this card is fusion summoned, you can target monsters on the field or in any graveyards up to the number of fusion monsters used as fusion material and return them to the hand. If 2 or more monsters are sent to the graveyard at the same time as this card in your graveyard, you can special summon this card when it leaves the field. So, this card is less useful than Grammel, and I'll explain. The Reborn effect from Altharion just gives you a fusion material. It just doesn't give you anything else. This effect is only on fusion summon, so to keep that in mind. That being said, this is an incredibly strong effect. Just being able to just return cards to the hand in using, depending on what materials you use from your hand. And take note, this can use multiple monsters in your hand as material. So, like for example, let's say for example you fused 4 monsters for this. You can grab at least 3 of them back, or just like bounce 1 from your opponent and grab 3, something like that. Another detail is, like, for example, let's say Grammel's already in your graveyard and you use Altharion. You can use Altharion to bounce, then use Grammel to reborn, and then in another chain you can just activate any other Dragon Tail, and then Grammel will just pick apart another card. Like, just too much card advantage. The other thing that's really good about Altharion is that, let's say in the mid to late game you just have hand traps in your graveyard that you don't want to reuse against your opponent. You can just grab those back. It doesn't have to be the materials that you used for this card that you can grab back. You can grab anything back. So that's a very important note. Now that we read the entire archetype, let's go back to the relevance behind Ketu and Fymena. So this card asks for Dragon and Spellcaster monsters to be fusion summoned. You don't have to fuse for specifically Dragon Tails. What Spellcaster monsters do we have that are very relevant in this game? We have a few notable ones. Mysterion can be made with any Spellcaster and Dragon, so it's very safe to say this card is probably going to be a staple in Dragon Tail. It's just very, very easy to summon. You can use the Dragon Tail monsters themselves. It has really big attack position. It has a good attack. And um, against the Dragon Tail mirror match, this card is actually very good. So, like, if the deck pops off and it becomes very popular, Mysterion is probably going to be one of those cards that just is going to be very beneficial in the matchup. You need specifically Blazing Cartesia for ground null, but it is a spellcaster monster you can make. So if you have Blazing Cartesia alongside any light or dark monster, you can fuse it using the Fymena. This asks for a Wishcraster and a spellcaster monster, so you can use your Dragon Tail monsters to make this, at least the spellcaster portion. Zorua asks for a few extra deck monster, so you can use your Dragon Tail for this as well. This one involves Dark Magician, but you can use a Dragon Effect monster, so any of these 3 dragons can be used to make Red Eyes Dark Deck Rune. So that's another relevant boss monster. And now we have El Chadol Winda. This is the scariest one of the bunch, and you'll see later why that is the case. You can, I think you can figure it out by now, but the main culprit that makes Winda very, very strong is Fymena. For dragons, you have Philia Regis and you have Dragon Maid Shu. You have other dragon monsters, like you have like Amulet Dragon that can fuse with Dark Magician. You can use like other monsters, but I felt like these are the most relevant ones. I think Dragon Maids fit very, very well into this archetype, and just Dragon Maid being like an Omni-Negate fusion monster that you can use with your Dragon Maid cards just is very fitting for an archetype like this one. Yeah. Other fusion monsters that are notable are some of these. Guardian Chimera is a no-brainer. You're probably wondering about Mud Dragon and Apkalon. Why are these here? You're probably wondering about these as well. I'll get to that point very soon. Let's go back to Dragon Tail. So the fact that the Dragon Tail monsters ask for materials in the hand is very relevant, because it asks for any monster. You can use hand traps, for example. Like, the really big benefit about this deck is, like, all these monster hand traps that you just have in your hand, if you have no use or need for them, like for example Moshami Fualos is a card that is just unplayable when you go first, you can just fuse the Fualos into any of the Dragon Tails and use the Dragon Tail effects and just start gaining card advantage, like, out of those cards. So now I think it's very safe to say this card is probably going to be a staple in Dragon Tail. I don't have to talk about Ash Blossom, I don't have to talk about Nibiru. Like, these are just good examples. If you use these hand traps to stop your opponent and then you go to your turn, you can Altharion and grab all your hand traps back to your hand. So that's another really big benefit about this effect, and why this archetype is already looking really strong to begin with. Now let's talk about a few more things you can do with Dragon Tails that are a little bit more sinister. We'll just put these cards away real quick. So, fusing for any card in the hand is very, very dangerous, because yes, hand traps are probably going to be the best utility. However, there are some cards in this game where they're just really powerful when you get to get paired with these cards. And this is where it gets into very dangerous territory. Like, imagine fusing using Gazelle and just bridging into your Chimera engine. Or just fusing EGM Chain, and EGM Chain just gives you more fusion cards to just fusion summon. Or using a Chadol monster and giving you access to Winda. And to make matters worse, you can just use your tier elements. And if you pair your tier elements with like other cards, like, that's where it gets really ridiculous. Like, this is one example of a hand. Let's say, for example, this is your opponent's turn. This is turn 0. The Dragon Tail Fymena is deceptively powerful. This card reminds me of Pure Element Halfness. Just having a monster very similar to Halfness. Like, there's a reason this card is limited. I don't have to explain how polarizing and powerful this card is. Let's just show you a few examples of stuff you can fuse with the Fymena. So, let's say for example you use Dark Magician and the Chamber Dragon Maid. Well, you can make Red Eyes Dark Dragoon on turn 0 in your opponent's turn. Yeah. You can use these two and make Grand Wignall. That's another example. You can use like after you've used for Grand Wignall, you can just shuffle back Halfness and, like, for example, Chamber Dragon Maid or Dark Magician, and just make Mud Dragon of the Swamp. If you use something like, for example, Muddy Mud Dragon by sending with Grand Wignall, you get access to Rokalos, which is also very scary. You can send El Chalo Apkalone with the Grand Wignall and use the Apkalone itself as a future material with your Tier Element and just make Winda. Now you're understanding just how powerful this can get. Like, this is very scary to think about. Like, being able to fusion summon on turn 0 for any of these monsters with just the utility behind Fymena is something you have to be wary about. And this is not even talking about the splash ability with, like, other aforementioned cards. Like, imagine if Kikalos was in the game, and let's say for example you'll use more Charmy Porolia with like a Tier Element monster to make one of your Dragon Tail monsters. Now you can fuse for Kikalos, then the Kikalos can dump another tier name, then the Kikalos can turn into Rokalos. It just snowballs a lot of advantage. Like, it's incredibly scary to think about. I don't think this card is ever coming back from the Forbidden Limited list. If it does, be mindful. You will probably see this on Tier Element decks. But yeah, this is pretty much all I wanted to talk about when it comes to Dragon Tail. There's a lot of creativity behind this archetype. Like, you can play all the Mo Charmies in this deck, and they just have utility, so they're not like really dead cards. Greater Polymerization can be used for fusing the Dragon Tail Altharion, for example, and just give you a lot of card advantage. Like, you can bridge into Chimera, like I mentioned earlier, with like Gazelle. Heavy Polymerization can use multiple Dragon Tails from your extra deck. Like, you can just use 2 Dragon Tail monsters, any monster from your hand, fuse for this, and you don't care that the Dragon Tail monsters are banished because you can just recycle them back with your trap cards. So, like, Magical Meltdown can be possible with this deck. Just imagine just bridging into like Invoke and using your Invoke engine to just bridge into your Dragon Tail monsters. Like, Alistair is a spellcaster, and Invoke Cositis is a dragon monster, and they require water monsters as fusion material. So you do have ways to make it. Yeah, keep an eye on this archetype. I think there's going to be a lot of scary things in the horizon waiting for us. But yeah, that's it from me. I hope you found this video to your liking and to your understanding. More videos coming soon. Keep practicing and keep dueling.